A minute, please. Uh, 2 minutes, guys. There is some technical point. It's not getting shared. One sec.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So meanwhile, guys, did you get some time to go through the document, beta? Were you able to download the PDF?
Yes, sir. I downloaded that E6 one.
Okay. Okay. E6 one. Yes, beta. That's the same thing I was referring to. If you are able to download it and if you are able to go through it, that's so nice. That's the one which I was trying to tell you. No sure. One sec, guys. There is some technical problem. I do not know what exactly is it. It's opening, but it's not sharing. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay. All right. But in the documentation, fine. This is again giving the same problem. All right. Revision of GCP error file system error Okay, guys. One more time. I'm just trying and let's see if it works. Bad. Just few minutes, guys. Few minutes, please. Sorry for the trouble.
Yes, sir.
Guys, can I join again? I'll restart the system. Okay, 2 minutes because I'm not able to share
Yes, sir.
anything. Okay.
Yes.
Hi guys, thanks for waiting up. I had to restart the system.
Yes, sir.
Sorry for that sort of a trouble which I couldn't anticipate earlier. So I think now the video will be working because I restarted the system. There was some problem in that. Um, Meanwhile, I'll just also show you um, the way how once you get certified from Right Academy, how the message is sent across. So first I am showing that. Is it fine, guys? Just 1 second. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So okay, I should this should share now. All right. Can you see the screen, guys?
Yes, sir.
This is how once you get certified, we announce on the net. It's on my personal as well as the organizational personal one. Where the person whoever is certified gets one. If you have my number being with you, you can check it out. The WhatsApp and the Insta has the start, or even Right Academy has this particular discussion. This is what I was telling ki you will be eligible for. Okay. Okay, guys. So next, I'll just share across the PPT point of view, the PDF version point. Sorry, the video version point of view. The second part for GCP, which now you can see. Okay, how? Fine. This now is playing well. All right. So you can see with the essential documents. That's the word.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
madam. So, so this last time what we had done was till this one. So we will be continuing ahead with essential documents. So playing it for you now, essential documents, and then I'll explain as it goes on.
We will discuss the types of essential documents and how they are important in clinical trials. Essential documents serve as a proof that the investigator, sponsor, and the monitor comply with all applicable regulatory requirements. Essential documents assist in the successful management of the study by the investigator, sponsor, and monitor. They are also a vital part in the management of the study and confirm the validity of the conduct of the clinical investigation and the integrity of the collected data.
So this is basically the three stakeholders which we know. Okay. So the three stakeholders have done their job is what is confirmed from the documentation. So there is always a saying in clinical research, if it is documented, it is done. If it is not documented, it is not done. So documentation is the most important point, and this is the essential documents part of it, which ensures that the entities have been performing their activity and it is documented on.
Essential documents can fall into three categories. 1. Documents that are collected and created before the clinical phase. 2. Ones that are done during the clinical phase. 3. Those that are generated after the completion or the termination of the trial. Last but not least, we will discuss what is known as the Trial Master File, or TMF. The Trial Master File is a collection of the essential documents for a sponsor to record how they have fulfilled their obligations for a clinical trial. An Electronic Trial Master File, or eTMF, is a formalized means of organizing and storing documents, images, and other digital content for pharmaceutical clinical trials that may be required for compliance with government regulations.
So this is the trial master file, TMF. So it's a collection of essential documents. So all the documents which are being part of clinical trial, starting from investigator brochure, it can be protocol, it can be the approval letters, it can be letters specific for adverse events, it can be any documentation, laboratory data, anything which is at the site or required in electronic format. Both the things are collected. Now, the earlier one was used to be paper copies. So paper copies used to go for common technical documents, while the electronic ones, electronic means the ones which are complying with 21 CFR Part 11 for signature point of view, essential signatures and essential confirmation point of view, they will be going for eCTD submissions, electronic CTD submissions. Okay, guys? Is this clear to you, beta?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Great.
So this was the part for essential documents. So essential documents are all the documents which are part of clinical trial. Now going to the next one. This is about the adverse events and serious adverse events. So this is one where you will have to learn also. Okay, I'll tell you about what to learn.
Sponsors that collect information on specific drugs and medical devices must anticipate the need for adverse events detection, processing, and reporting. This module addresses the identification, processing, and reporting of AEs detected in situations in which a registry sponsor has individual patient contact. An adverse event, or AE, can be any unfavorable and unintended sign, including an abnormal laboratory finding, symptom, or disease temporarily associated with the use of a medicinal product, whether or not related to the medicinal or investigational product.
So beta, this is the definition for an adverse event. So it is any untoward medical occurrence in a patient or a clinical investigation subject administered a pharmaceutical product which does not necessarily have a causal relationship with this treatment. Okay. It can be symptoms, it can be physical exam findings, it can be syndromes, it can be abnormal laboratory values or worsening of a pre-existing condition. I'll give you an example to make you understand that how it is not related in that part directly or indirectly to whether the person is having a symptom which is related to or not related to a particular drug entity. Okay, irrespective of that, it has to be reported. Let's take an example. Supposingly, there is a guy who is taking medication and he was crossing the road. And he met with an accident. Okay. Now, do you think this is because of medicine? Yes, guys. आप बोल सकते हैं आंसर बेटा, बिंदास बोलो.
Sir, can you repeat once more?
ओके एक बंदा है जो क्लिनिकल ट्रायल में पार्टिसिपेट कर रहा है, ठीक है, लेकिन वही बंदा बाहर निकला घूमने के लिए या किसी चीज़ के लिए, तो रोड पे निकला. ओके, रोड पे उसको एक गाड़ी ने ठोक दिया. ठीक है, एज सिंपल एज दैट, हिंदी में अगर बोलो तो क्या आपको लगता है ये ड्रग के कारण हो सकता है उसको जो एक्सीडेंट हुआ है?
No, sir.
नहीं भी हो सकता है ना.
हो भी सकता है, नहीं भी हो सकता है, राइट?
Yes.
ऐसा सोच सकते. अच्छा, वेरी गुड, दैट्स अ वेरी गुड थॉट. अच्छा, आपको क्यों लगता है कि वो ड्रग के कारण हो सकता है? ड्रग से ऐसा क्या है जो जिसके कारण एक्सीडेंट हो सकता है? तो मैं आपको हेल्प करता हूँ. सेडेशन हो सकता है, हो सकता है कि वो, हाँ, हो सकता है वो कि ड्रग उसको सेडेशन देता हो. जैसे अगर आप कोडीन कफ सिरप अगर आप पीते हो तो हल्का सा थोड़ा सा आपको खुमार आता है, थोड़ा सा सेडेशन लगता है, नींद आता है, आपका ध्यान बढ़ता है. हो सकता है उसके कारण वो हट नहीं पाया और वो टाइप उसका रिस्पॉन्स प्रॉपर नहीं था और वो उसके कारण एक्सीडेंट हुआ. हो सकता है ना, बट दिस इज अ पॉसिबिलिटी, कॉजल रिलेशन का पॉसिबिलिटी है, बट नॉट नेसेसरली, जरूरी नहीं कि ऐसी हो. ओके, बट वो एक्सीडेंट विल बी रिपोर्टेड एज एन एडवर्स इवेंट. ओके, एंड उसके बारे में डिसीजन बाद में होगा. आपको रिपोर्ट पहले करना है कि वो एडवर्स इवेंट है. तो एनी एडवर्स इवेंट, कुछ भी इवेंट हुआ हो जो सिम्टम्स बेस्ड, फिजिकल एग्जाम बेस्ड, सिंड्रोम या डिजीज बेस्ड या एबनॉर्मल लेबोरेटरी वैल्यू वाला बेस्ड हो, जो एग्जिस्टिंग कंडीशन को थोड़ा सा और बिगाड़े या नया कंडीशन क्रिएट करे, ये दोनों ही केस में यू विल कॉल इट एज एडवर्स इवेंट. ओके बेटा, इज इट क्लियर? फाइन. तो बेटा आप इसका चाहिए तो स्क्रीनशॉट ले सकते हो या फिर आप इसे याद कर सकते हो कैसा करना चाहोगे, याद करके बताना चाहोगे या फिर स्क्रीनशॉट लेके खुद ही याद करोगे बाद में? हाउ डू यू वांट टू डू इट? अभी याद करके मुझे बताना चाहोगे? आप टाइम ले सकते हो, 4-5 मिनट्स, दैट्स फाइन।
Yes, sir.
या ठीक है, थैंक यू। कितना टाइम चाहिए बेटा आपको इसे याद करने के लिए?
Sir, 2-3 minutes.
चलो डन, 4 मिनट्स दिए आपको। ओके, राइट नाउ इट इज 8:03, आई विल आस्क यू एट 8:07। ठीक है, डन। डन बेटा?
Yes, sir.
हेलो, ओके बेटा, वांट टू गिव इट अ ट्राई या डू यू वांट टू राइट इट डाउन योरसेल्फ वंस? कैसा करना चाहते हो? आई एम फाइन विद इट, नो प्रॉब्लम बेटा, व्हाटएवर इट इज। आप चाहिए तो बिना देखे वो आपके पास वहाँ बुक में या किसी में लिखा तो भी चलेगा, बिकॉज दिस इज वन ऑफ द एंटिटीज विच इज कंपल्सरी टू बी लर्न आउट, इसलिए है बेटा, ठीक है? ऑलराइट,
Yes.
आई बिलीव यू हैव लर्न, नो प्रॉब्लम, आई विल कंटिन्यू। ओके,
Adverse events may be symptoms, physical exam findings, syndromes or diseases, abnormal laboratory values, or worsening of a pre-existing condition. Besides adverse events, there are also serious adverse events. A serious adverse event is considered to be any untoward medical occurrence that results in death, is life-threatening, requires inpatient hospitalization or prolongation of existing hospitalization, persistent or significant disability or incapacity, congenital anomaly or birth defect, or important medical events.
so beta, this is the second definition which is very critical for understanding and ensuring that you know it. So this is about serious adverse events. So when you say serious adverse events, for example, heart attack, okay, we call it as myocardial infarction, MI बोलते हैं हम लोग मेडिकल टर्म में. इट इज कंसिडर्ड एज अ सीरियस एडवर्स इवेंट. अब हार्ट अटैक को हम लोग ऐसा नहीं बोलते कि भाई, जैसे हेडेक को हम लोग बोलते हैं कि माइल्ड हो सकता है, मॉडरेट हो सकता है, सिवियर हो सकता है. यानी हेडेक आपको डेथ पे नहीं लेके जाएगा, लेकिन हेडेक आपको तकलीफ जरूर देगा, यानी इट विल बी प्रॉब्लमेटिक फॉर अ पर्सन. तो हेडेक को हम लोग क्लासिफाई करते हैं इन टर्म्स ऑफ सिवियरिटी. बट जो आपके लिए डेथ प्रोलॉन्गिंग हो सकता है, जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल हार्ट अटैक. हार्ट अटैक को हम लोग ऐसे नहीं बोलते कि माइल्ड हार्ट अटैक आया था, नहीं, दैट्स नॉट अ टर्म. हार्ट अटैक इज कंसिडर्ड एज अ सीरियस एडवर्स इवेंट बिकॉज दिस कैन कॉज डेथ. ओके, so serious adverse event is considered to be any untoward medical occurrence that results in number one death, यानी sure death हो जाता है वैसा, या second is life threatening, it is threatening for life, it can go to the peripheral level of coma or something like that. It may be something which requires patient hospitalization, इसके कारण हॉस्पिटलाइज करना पड़े पेशेंट को, ऐसा. या हॉस्पिटलाइज पर्सन का जो द रिलीज डेट है या डिस्पैच जिसको बोलते हैं, द डेट वेयर द पर्सन कैन गो होम, वो प्रोलोंगेट कर दे, तो देन इट इज कॉल्ड एज अ सीरियस एडवर्स इवेंट. इसके अलावा इट कैन बी समथिंग विच कैन मेक द पर्सन परसिस्टेंट और सिग्निफिकेंट डिसेबिलिटी या इनकेपेसिटी. फॉर एग्जाम्पल बेटा, आपको अगर याद होगा तो थैलिडोमाइड केस में, थैलिडोमाइड जो है वो परमानेंट डिसेबिलिटी या इनकेपेसिटी करता है क्योंकि लिम्स ग्रो ही नहीं होते. तो वो आपके दो कैटेगरी में आता है, सिग्निफिकेंट डिसेबिलिटी. बट ये डिसेबिलिटी कब हुआ था? बर्थ के टाइम पे. तो बर्थ के टाइम पे होने के कारण कंजेनाइटल एनामोली यानी ट्रांसफर फ्रॉम मदर टू चाइल्ड वाला पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से कंजेनाइटल एनामोली या बर्थ डिफेक्ट के नाम से भी जानते हैं. So that's an example which is for both persistent as well as, sorry, significant as well as congenital anomaly and birth defect. Important medical events हो सकता है, यानी something which can lead to coma or arrhythmias. Arrhythmias means heart improper functioning करे, which can lead to cardiac myopathy and stuff like that. So serious adverse events ये कैटेगरी के होते हैं. जबकि एडवर्स इवेंट्स को हम लोग तीन में कैटेगराइज करते हैं. मैंने जैसे आपको बताया, माइल्ड, मॉडरेट एंड सिवियर. तो हेडेक आपका कभी भी सीरियस एडवर्स इवेंट नहीं बनता है, लेकिन हेडेक कैन बी माइल्ड हेडेक, इट कैन बी मॉडरेट हेडेक और इट कैन बी सिवियर हेडेक विच विल बी अ पर्टिकुलर थिंग विच इज ट्रबलसम. ओके, so is it clear beta, serious adverse event, why adverse event is different and why serious adverse event beta?
Yes, sir.
ओके बेटा,
Yes,
क्योंकि ये
sir.
क्वेश्चंस में रहता है, दिस इज समथिंग विच इज वेरी कॉमन. फाइन, ओके, थैंक यू बेटा, कंटिन्यू.
AEs are categorized according to three different factors: the seriousness of the event, the expectedness, and the relatedness with the use of the product. The attribution is the determination of whether an AE is related to a medical treatment or procedure. Attribution categories are definite. The AE is clearly related to the treatment or procedure. Probable. The AE is likely related to the treatment or procedure. Possible. The AE may be related to the treatment or procedure. Unlikely. The AE is doubtfully related to the treatment or procedure. And unrelated. The AE is clearly not related to the treatment or procedure. When an AE is detected, a report should be compiled. But who should do the reporting, and who should the report go to? The sponsor should expedite reporting to all concerned institutions, such as to the IRB or IEC, and to the regulatory authorities of all adverse drug reactions, or ADRs, that are both serious and unexpected, and a bit about how to manage AEs. As a general rule, treatment codes should be broken by the sponsor before reporting an SUSAR to the competent or regulatory authority and the IRB IEC. Although it is advantageous to retain the blind for all patients prior to final study analysis, when a serious adverse event may be a serious adverse reaction, judge reportable on an expedited basis, it is recommended that the blind be broken only for that.
So this gives clarity. Sorry guys, I just got a call. Alright, so this gives a clarity of how the adverse events and serious adverse events are important and how it's important to document, report and submit it in detail. Fine guys. Okay, so if there is any questions, beta, I can answer this or otherwise I can go to the next video. Any questions from you guys?
Sir. No questions, sir.
Okay. So absolutely clear. Fine. Fantastic. That sounds good. Okay. So let's next go to something called as another important one, monitoring, auditing and inspection. So these are another components which are studied in those 13 principles.
This chapter, we are going to review the three aspects of the clinical trial that ensure the proper and ethical conduct of clinical studies: monitoring, auditing, and inspections, collectively known as quality control procedures. In order to fully understand monitoring, first one must have a better understanding of what quality systems are and what are their purposes. Quality control systems are the operational techniques and activities undertaken to verify the requirements for the quality of trial-related activities. Monitoring is a part of the QC activity. Monitoring activities are undertaken by the trial members themselves. At the same time, audit and inspection are part of QA activities, but are undertaken by personnel independent of trial, in accordance, of course, with the protocol of the study, standard operating procedures, or SOPs, GCP, and applicable regulatory requirements. Here we will provide you with a better understanding of the position of the monitor, also called Clinical Research Associate, and what his role and responsibilities are concerning clinical trials and GCP. A monitor is an individual employed by a pharmaceutical or medical device manufacturer, by a contract research organization, CRO, usually acting on a sponsor's behalf, or by an academic institute conducting clinical trials. Some of the major responsibilities of the monitor are assuring the protection of the rights, safety, and well-being of human study subjects, to analyze and evaluate clinical data, to ensure investigator and site compliance with the study drug protocol, overall clinical objectives, FDA EMA regulations, ICH guidelines, and good clinical practice. Another responsibility is to help in the study site selection process, initiate and eventually close out clinical study sites. To monitor the progress of clinical study sites participating in a clinical study, and to ensure that protocol is followed and data is reported accurately.
So this is the major monitor's responsibility with us. So we have seen what is sponsor responsibility, we have seen what is the responsibility of ethics committee, we have seen the responsibility of other persons who are participating in the trial, investigator, sub-investigator, co-investigator, other persons. So the one which is another role which is being there is of a monitor. Normally a monitor is by the designation called as a clinical research associate. That's why the word CRA is mentioned there. So this the monitor can be on behalf of the pharma company, or he or she can be on behalf of the contract research organization which has been entrusted with doing this particular trial by the pharma company. So both the groups, it can be from any of those particular parts. It can be a CRO person or it can be a pharma person who will be doing this particular part. So they are entitled for this, and these are the major responsibilities for them. Okay, beta. So if you feel like, you can take a screenshot of it, because this is the roles, major roles and responsibilities of monitor, another essential person in the alignment of getting the study properly done, and that's what his role is also now. Okay, guys. Any question here, beta? If it is clear, let me know.
Yes, it's clear.
Okay, beta. Continuing further.
To make certain that the scientific integrity of the data collected is protected and verified. Also, to assure that adverse events are correctly documented and reported. Review all case report forms and compare them to source documents. Auditing is the systematic and independent examination of trial-related activities and documents to determine whether the evaluated trial-related activities were conducted and whether the data was recorded, analyzed, and accurately reported according to the protocol, sponsor, SOPs, GCP, and applicable regulatory requirements. Most cited clinical trial areas during audits include adverse event review and reporting, closure of study or lapse in approvals while studying, related activities which are still ongoing, informed consent process and documentation, drug or device accountability, and protocol adherence.
So these are the functions which come under the auditing process. So auditing, I was explaining to you guys last time also. So auditing is being done to ensure that there is no findings during any inspection which is being done by the FDA. So auditing is basically being done by the internal groups or the groups which are part of a big conglomerate. What I mean was, I was giving the example, let's say Tata. So Tata Group is a very big group. It has its presence in almost all types of things, starting from making automobiles to producing salt, to producing, having flying, to have consultancies, everything. So there can be a auditing team from TCS, Tata Consultancy Services, going and auditing something called Tata Motors. So that is auditing which is within the conglomerate which is happening. So that is also a part which can be there. So anything of those sort can also be coming under the audits. Now these audits, if it is done for clinical research perspective, and where patient and intended use of drug is the point which is being accounted for, they will be using the auditing based on GCP principles. So if there is a GCP, I say GCP audit, it is the audit which is from the clinical research perspective. Otherwise, there can be an ISO audit, or it can be an audit other way around also. Okay, these are the various types of audits which can happen. So audit is a systematic and independent examination of the trial-related activities and documents to determine whether the evaluated trial related activities were conducted and the data were recorded, analyzed, and accurately reported according to the protocol sponsor, SOPs, GCPs, and applicable regulatory requirements. What does it mean? It means that whatever has been done has been documented, and whatever has been documented was done in compliance with what was agreed upon by the FDA's rules or other rules of the land. Okay. So the most cited clinical trial areas during audits include what they usually check is the adverse event review and reporting. So whether all AEs were reported or reviewed, closure of the study or lapse in approval while study is related activities are still going on. So that means if the study is still going on and if there is an audit taken place, whether the closure has occurred or not, whether all the reports have been submitted, all the reports have been taken care of is what is to be informed out. Informed consent process and documentation. Now there is a newest norm here. As per the latest from 2015 onwards, you have to video record your informed consent process also, and that audit files have to be there. That huge video files have to be stored and preserved as per the requirement. Then there is a drug device accountability. That means if a drug is being used in a trial, then you have to look at it, how much was used out, was there any spare drug, was there any excess drug packets being left out. So tally of the number of packets which are received. So you say logistics of it also, you look into the storage also, because you have to report about the stability data also. If it is a device, then you have to look about the device, whether it was performing at the requisite level it was supposed to perform. For example, if you have a CRI, if you have a CT scan, if the CT scans levels should be and the output should be as what it has been mentioned out. And if it is an MRI scan, you have to see whether the magnetic resonance is giving you the same magnetic resonance as is mentioned out. So that's what is being looked into. Another one is protocol adherence, whether the entire protocol was adhered to while the entire study took place is another point which you have to ensure. So these are the ones which are getting covered in auditing. Okay guys? Alright, any questions beta? No, okay?
No.
Fine.
No, sir.
Continuing further then.
Now we will define inspection and explain the main differences between inspection and audit. The act by a regulatory authority or authorities of conducting an official review of documents, facilities, records, and any other resources that are deemed by the authorities to be related to the clinical trial and that may be located at the site of the trial, at the sponsors and/or CRO's facilities, or at other establishments deemed appropriate by the regulatory authorities. Some differences between an audit and an inspection are: in audit, inspectors are employed by the company who work for active clinical quality assurance function. An audit is done to ensure that a site complies with protocol, SOP, GCP, and applicable regulatory requirements.
So you can see better, if it is the auditing is done, it's company's own persons, they form the QA department of the company. So you also call them as CQA because it's clinical quality assurance, because we are talking about clinical research perspective. Otherwise it is a QA department which you are referring to, okay? And in inspection, as you can see, inspectors are employed by the government, and this is by the government. For example, agencies which are competent like FDA and DCGI as in India, okay? So this is being done from an external part. So external audit performing independent guys from a respective organization of the government will be called as inspection.
In inspection, inspectors are employed by government, though the agency of the regulatory or competent authority, the FDA or the DCGI. An inspection is done to ensure that trial-related obligations and acceptability of resultant clinical data is relevant. Now that we have reviewed the differences between the audits and inspections, let's take a look at what the inspection process is. The inspections consist of site visits to the organization and, where appropriate, selected clinical investigator sites. The inspection starts with an opening meeting where the lead inspector usually outlines the scope and purpose of the inspection, confirms the inspection plan, and introduces the inspectors. Upon completion of the inspection process, if inspectors find issues related to the clinical trial process, certain measures should be taken. Here are a few examples of most common findings during an inspection. Protocol non-compliance, inadequate or inaccurate records, informed consent issues, among others.
So guys, these are the common findings which inspectors or the regulatory body find when they conduct a trial. So if you want to see this, they are protocol non-compliance. That means the protocol written and and what is supposed to be followed is not what is being followed. This happens majorly when the monitor is not being able to implement an activity. क्योंकि बेटा मॉनिटर का भी एक चैलेंज होता है. मॉनिटर इज अ पर्सन हु इज अ कंपनी रिप्रेजेंटेटिव एंड ही हैज टू गो एंड टेल अ क्लिनिशियन मतलब एक फिजिशियन जो कि अपने डोमेन का एक्सपर्ट हो, उसको आप बोलने वाले हो कि भाई आप यही तरीके से करोगे. एंड नॉर्मली फिजिशियंस if they are not being given the right direction and they may want to do it their own way, so that can be a problem. Okay, that's protocol non-compliance. Then inadequate and inaccurate records, यानी आपने अगर records properly keep up नहीं किया है, अगर records proper नहीं है तो बड़ा कभी ना कभी वो बाहर आ ही जाता है. मैं इसलिए बोलता हूँ कभी ना कभी क्योंकि कभी कभी कुछ जगह बच जाता है, कुछ जगह रिकॉर्ड्स आपके रह जाते हैं, मतलब कुछ पता नहीं चलता है. बट अल्टीमेटली बेटा अगर कोई भी कहीं पे भी कुछ भी गड़बड़ करता है और वो डॉक्यूमेंटेशन में रहता है तो कहीं ना कहीं कभी ना कभी उसका ऐसा टाइम आ ही जाता है कि वो रिकॉर्ड्स बाहर आता है. क्योंकि यहाँ पे रिकॉर्ड कीपिंग का जो टाइम पीरियड है 7 to 14 ईयर्स है. तो 7 to 14 ईयर्स में इक्वेशंस चेंज भी होते हैं. फॉर एग्जांपल हो सकता है कि जब रिकॉर्ड उस वक्त था और आपका नहीं दिखा दिया तो किसी पर्सन को मालूम होगा, उसने आपका नहीं बताया होगा डिटेल्स, लेकिन वो हो सकता है 3 साल बाद 4 साल बाद उसको ऐसा फील हुआ, उसने बोल दिया और इन्फॉर्म कर दिया हो, एनोनिमस भी किया हो, तब भी वो रिकॉर्ड अगर चेक होता है एंड इफ इट इज़ बीइंग फाउंड आउट कि वो 7 ईयर्स बैक भी आपने कुछ गड़बड़ किया है, तो इन क्लिनिकल अरीना, इन द फार्मास्यूटिकल अरीना इट इज़ पनिशेबल. एग्जाम्पल इज नाजी डॉक्टर्स जिन लोगों ने अपने टाइम पे किया था, दे हैड सेड कि उस टाइम पे तो कोई रूल्स भी नहीं था उनको गवर्न करने के लिए, इसीलिए उन्होंने वही किया जो नाजी सोल्जर्स और हिटलर ने बोला था. तो बट दे वेर ट्राइड एंड दे वेर पनिश्ड इवन आफ्टर अबाउट 70 years. ओके, सो इट्स नॉट समथिंग विच डजंट गो अनचार्टर्ड, ऐसा नहीं होता है. ओके, so inadequate, inaccurate records are not a right thing to do. So that's one point. Then another is informed consent issues. Informed consent अभी आपने properly नहीं लिया है, किसी से sign करवा लिया, stamp करवा लिया, video recording proper नहीं है, anything of that can be a finding. Another one is adverse event reporting. Adverse event आपका हुआ लेकिन आपने रिपोर्ट नहीं किया, भूल गए, नहीं हुआ या कहीं ना कहीं रह गया, ऐसा कई पेशेंट ने नहीं बताया या फिर डॉक्टर ने इससे हैक से रह गया, कुछ हुआ ऐसा. एंड इफ इट इज़ नॉट डॉक्यूमेंटेड, अगेन एज आई सेड, इफ इट इज़ नॉट डॉक्यूमेंटेड इट इज़ कंसिडर्ड नॉट डन. सो देन इट बिकम्स इंस्पेक्शन फाइंडिंग्स. एंड दैट्स व्हाई नॉर्मली ऑडिटर्स का लोगों का डर इसलिए रहता है कि ऑडिटर्स का डरने का कुछ वो नहीं है. अगर आपके सारे प्रोसेसेस करेक्ट हैं तो आपको कोई डरने का ज़रूरत नहीं रहता, क्योंकि he or she is also another person. So if there is no mistake at your end, you will not have a problem. But if you have faltered somewhere and you feel that there is something wrong, then you may make a mistake. That's the way. So that's what inspection process and most common findings are all about. And then based on this, you have something called as CAPA, corrective action, preventive action, documents been prepared out. Okay, fine guys. Okay,
Yes.
should I go to the next one? Yeah.
Sir, can I ask one
Yes, sir.
question?
Yes बेटा, please do. हाँ बोलो बेटा.
सर अभी ऑडिट में जो भी फाइंडिंग्स होगा, यानी वो लोग जो भी मिस्टेक्स
हाँ.
निकालेंगे तो उसके बाद उसको रेक्टिफाई किया जाएगा ना,
हाँ
या
हाँ
कि डायरेक्ट
हाँ
उसमें भी
बेटा, एक मिनट मैं आपको, नहीं रेक्टिफाई किया जाता है आपको। मैं समझ गया आपका क्वेश्चन। तो मैं आपको इसको एक्सप्लेन करने के लिए 1 मिनट के लिए स्क्रीन शेयरिंग डिफरेंटली चेंज कर रहा हूँ, ताकि आपको मैं एक डिफरेंट स्क्रीन दिखाऊं, गूगल वाला। ओके,
ओके।
अब स्क्रीन दिख रहा है बेटा? ओके, अभी मैं आपको इसमें जो मैं बोल रहा था वो बताता हूँ। पहले देखते हैं ऑडिट फाइंडिंग्स। ओके, आपने बहुत अच्छा क्वेश्चन पूछा है, गुड। ऑडिट फाइंडिंग्स क्या होता है? तो पहले ये देखो, तो सच एज ऑडिट फाइंडिंग बेस्ड ऑन एविडेंस अबाउट बैंक ऑपरेशन, कुछ कहीं पे भी हो सकता है बेटा। ऑडिट कहीं पे भी किया जाता है, यानी ऑडिट आपका फाइनेंशियल सेक्टर में भी करते हैं, हर सेक्टर में ऑडिट होता है, पहला पॉइंट। ठीक है, हर जगह मिस्टेक भी होता है, ऐसा भी नहीं है कि बिल्कुल मिस्टेक नहीं होता है। लेकिन बेटा डॉक्टर से एक्सपेक्टेड नहीं है कि कोई मिस्टेक हो, क्योंकि यहाँ पे मिस्टेक का मतलब लाइफ होता है, करेक्ट। बाकी जगह आप मिस्टेक करोगे, नंबर्स का मिस्टेक है फाइनेंस में, ठीक है, इट कैन बी रेक्टिफाइड लेटर, भाई पेड बाद में कर दिया, पेड आफ्टर कर दिया। लेकिन वंस लाइफ इज लॉस्ट यू कांट बी ब्रिंगिंग इट बैक। तो ऑडिट इन क्लिनिकल रिसर्च अरीना इज वेरी स्टिफ, ये पहला पॉइंट है बेटा। ओके, क्योंकि आपने एक मेडिसिन में मिस्टेक दे दिया और उस, फॉर एग्जांपल एक मेडिसिन जो कंटामिनेटेड था, एक बैच जो कंटामिनेटेड था, और आपने सर्टिफाई कर दिया कि नॉर्मल, ठीक है। तो कंटामिनेटेड बैच का जो टैबलेट्स है, जितने लोगों ने खाया रहेगा उन सबको साइड इफेक्ट्स होगा। उनको साइड इफेक्ट्स अगर हुआ है और उससे डेथ हो रहा है, तो रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी उस पर्सन की रहेगा जिसने सर्टिफाई किया था। इसीलिए क्यूसी वाला बंदा हमेशा सकते में रहता है कि भाई वो उसके ऊपर कभी नाम नहीं आना चाहिए, क्योंकि उसके ऊपर नाम आया मतलब वो पर्सन का जॉब जाता है। ओके, वैसा रहता है। लेकिन अगर जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल अभी आपने आपका फाइंडिंग ये आया कि सीवी में आपने अपडेशन प्रॉपरली नहीं किया है, मतलब आपसे एक्सपेक्टेड रहता है कि भाई सीवी हर 6 महीने में आप अपडेट करो। 3 महीने बोला जाता है, लेकिन 6 महीने मिनिमम आप अगर नहीं किया तो भी चलता है, ऐसा रहता है। तो 6 महीने का बोला जाता है। तो अगर आपको 6 महीने का अपडेशन के बजाय में आपने जब ज्वाइन किया था तब का सीवी है और आज 1.5 साल हो गया है, मतलब अपडेट नहीं है, तो इट्स अ फाइंडिंग। बट ये फाइंडिंग ऐसा ग्रॉस फाइंडिंग तो नहीं है कुछ। ओके, क्योंकि भाई आपने अपडेशन नहीं किया इसके लिए, बट इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि आप ट्रेन नहीं हो, बट आप ट्रेंड हो। ओनली थिंग इज आपने अपडेशन नहीं किया। तो दो सॉर्ट ऑफ फाइंडिंग्स कैन बी माइनर फाइंडिंग्स। तो फाइंडिंग्स के टाइप्स होते हैं, तो उसके हिसाब से कापा होता है। तो देर इज CAPA, कापा। ओके, ऑडिट कापा बोलते हैं। तो देखो बेटा क्या है, करेक्टिव एक्शन एंड प्रिवेंटिव एक्शन। दिख रहा है बेटा आपको?
हाँ सर, दिख रहा है।
तो हाँ, तो इसका मतलब
Yes.
क्या रहता है, इसका पर्पस देखो, नीचे देखो बेटा, देर इज समथिंग कॉल्ड, आप इसके बेसिस पे बच जाते हो। द पर्पस ऑफ करेक्टिव प्रिवेंटिव एक्शन सिस्टम इज टू कलेक्ट इन्फॉर्मेशन, एनालाइज इन्फॉर्मेशन, आइडेंटिफाई एंड इन्वेस्टिगेट अ प्रॉब्लम। ठीक है, तो आपका करेक्टिव एक्शन क्या रहेगा? अपडेट योर सीवी, ये वो लिख के जाएगा, ठीक है, वो माइनर फाइंडिंग है आपका। अच्छा, अब ये माइनर फाइंडिंग है, ज़्यादा मेजर नहीं है, कुछ प्रॉब्लमेटिक नहीं है, चला गया वो। आपका बॉस आपको बोलेगा क्या है आपने किया नहीं, दैट्स इट, वो आप कर लोगे आप। और फिर आप क्या करोगे? इंश्योर करने के लिए एक पर्टिकुलर सिस्टम बनाओगे कि हर एक को पता चल जाए कि किसको उसका नेक्स्ट, जैसे अपन बोलते हैं ना बर्थडे का शीट रहता है, भाई किसका बर्थडे कब आता है करके एक शीट बना के रखता है HR, वैसे ही आपका शीट रहेगा जिसमें लिखा रहेगा कि हाँ भाई ये मार्च लास्ट में आपने अपडेट किया है। तो 6 महीने बाद का वो डेट रहेगा कि अपडेट किया है नहीं किया है। एक आपने एक फाइल बना दिया, या आपने एक टैग कर दिया अपने गूगल में टाइमलाइन में। तो गूगल में टाइमलाइन में पॉपअप आएगा 6 महीने बाद, अपडेट योर सीवी। ठीक है, आपने ऐसा कुछ किया तो, और वो मेंशन किया कि भाई ये मैंने करेक्शन किया है और ये आगे ना हो इसके लिए प्रिवेंशन में ये मेथड यूज कर रहा हूँ, तो दैट इज ओवर, देन दैट इज सॉल्व्ड अप, यानी वो जो फाइंडिंग था इज ओवर, द फाइंडिंग इज टेकन केयर ऑफ, देन इट डजंट रिमेन एज अ फाइंडिंग, द फाइंडिंग इज मूव्ड आउट एज रिजॉल्व्ड केस। फाइन बेटा, इज इट क्लियर?
यस सर, यस सर।
ओके, लेकिन बेटा अगर ये पेशेंट के कंटेक्स्ट में हो और फिजिशियन से हुआ हो, ओके, फॉर एग्जांपल एक फिजिशियन ने वॉल्स गलत काट दी हो, मतलब आपके हार्ट में दो वॉल्व है, मेट्रल वॉल्व और बाइकस्पिड वॉल्व के अलावा एक और ट्राइकस्पिड और बाइकस्पिड दो वॉल्व है। डिफेक्ट ट्राइकस्पिड में था और बंदे ने ऑपरेट बाइकस्पिड किया, ठीक है। अगर ऐसा कुछ ग्रॉस एरर है तो देयर इज नो करेक्टिव एक्शन। am I मेकिंग क्लियर बेटा? तो ये करेक्टिव एक्शन नहीं हो सकता है, क्योंकि अभी क्या है कि आपने जो लॉस किया उसका लॉस किया है, तो आप ब्लैकलिस्ट हो गए, आप कंपेंसेशन भरोगे, जो कुछ चीज़ें रहेगा वो आप पे किया जाएगा बेटा, ओके, वैसा रहेगा। ऑलराइट, सो टेकिंग यू बैक टू द part where I can just show you further. Okay guys, you can see the screen guys. I'll play it further now.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So now this is the one which is examples of risk in clinical trials. Clinical trials में कौन कौन सा risk है उसके context में है बेटा।
Everybody contributing. Once everybody was talking, then we realised that the team had an opportunity that they hadn't acknowledged and that was going to improve the overall value of the clinical trial. So these are some sorts of examples of risks that you might identify from doing a clinical trial risk assessment. And these are the sorts of things that could potentially have an impact on monitoring. Because of ineffective study feasibility, there's a risk that sites won't recruit to expectation, resulting in missing study recruitment milestones. But equally, because of ineffective study feasibility, again, sites will not recruit to expectation, resulting in recruitment being completed too soon. We did actually find that we might recruit the patients too soon for a seasonal, I can't remember what the condition was, but it was seasonal. We did it all too soon. We wouldn't have been into the season when the problem occurred. Because of new technology for collecting data from sites, there's a risk some data may be missing, which would result in a compromised stats analysis. Because of high staff turnover at some sites, there's a risk that site staff training will need to be repeated, resulting in extra on-site monitoring visits. Now, of course, that's a monitoring risk. Because of using a CRO for monitoring, there's a risk that the contract may say visit every 6 to 8 weeks, which will result in not implementing risk-based monitoring, which does not say go every 6 to 8 weeks. Or last one, because of a delay in getting the IP packaged, there's a risk that the IP won't get to the sites on time, resulting in a delay to recruitment.
So guys, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Still, I'll take a minute to just explain few things. ये बेटा आपके एग्जाम्पल्स ऑफ रिस्क है, यानी क्या रिस्क हो सकता है मॉनिटरिंग साइड पे। ओके, तो पहला होता है इनएफेक्टिव स्टडी फिजिबिलिटी, यानी स्टडी का फिजिबिलिटी, स्टडी कैसे होगा, कंडक्ट प्रॉपर होगा या नहीं होगा, वो सब आपको देखने के लिए एक स्टडी फिजिबिलिटी टेस्ट पहले करते हैं। आप चेक करते हो कि वेदर स्टडी फिजिबिलिटी इज देयर। ओके, तो अगर वो फिजिबिलिटी स्टडी आपका प्रॉपर नहीं रहेगा तो देन यू वुड हैव अ प्रॉब्लम, बिकॉज देन यू विल नॉट बी एबल टू गेट थिंग्स डन। कैसे? अगर फॉर एग्जांपल आपने एक्सपेक्टेड किया है कि भाई यहाँ पे एक ये हॉस्पिटल प्रीमाइस रहेगा, इस हॉस्पिटल प्रीमाइस में पेशेंट्स भी अच्छे से आते हैं एंड रिक्रूटमेंट भी प्रॉपर है, एवरीथिंग इज फाइन, एंड सडनली बिकॉज द मैनेजमेंट चेंज्ड, ओके, उस पर्टिकुलर हॉस्पिटल का मैनेजमेंट चेंज हो गया जो आपको आइडिया नहीं था। तो अभी क्या होगा, उसके डॉक्टर्स पे इफेक्ट पड़ेगा, साइट सिलेक्शन पे इफेक्ट पड़ेगा, यानी ये आपके कंट्रोल का नहीं है लेकिन ये हो गया है। तो ये एक हो सकता है। तो उसमें क्या हो सकता है, साइट एक्सपेक्टेशन रिक्रूटमेंट नहीं कर पाएगा, रिक्रूटमेंट कंप्लीटली नहीं कर पाएगा, दैट्स वन पॉइंट। या फिर ऐसा रहेगा कि जो डॉक्टर है वो चूँकि उसको बोला कि भाई 2 महीने में आपका रिलीविंग है, ऐसा बोला रहेगा, तो जो 6 महीने में करना है वो फटाफट 2 महीने में कर रहा है ना। रिक्रूटमेंट कंप्लीटेड टू सून एंड द एनालिसिस कंप्लीटेड टू सून, क्योंकि उससे पैसे लिया है या फिर ही हैड कमिटेड, तो इसीलिए वो कंप्लीट करके दे रहा है। So that can be ineffective examples. वो risk हो सकता है क्योंकि then it is risky because it can be problematic क्योंकि they may do a very shabby work. न्यू टेक्नोलॉजी फॉर कलेक्टिंग डेटा फ्रॉम साइट ऐसा हुआ हो सकता है पहले पेपर में सब लोग साइन करते थे, अचानक फिर आपने एक सिस्टम लेके आ गए, कंप्यूटर में होने लगा, तो वो पेपर और कंप्यूटर को जब आपने देखा तो उसके बीच में ऐसे एक हफ्ता ऐसा टाइम था जब कंप्यूटर आपका लग रहा था, उस प्रोसेस स्टैंडर्डाइज हो रहा था, तो उस वक्त ना तो पेपर में लिखा गया ना कंप्यूटर में डेटा है, यानी डेटा अपग्रेडेशन के टाइम का कॉम्प्रोमाइज स्टैट एनालिसिस। तो ये हो सकता है हाई स्टाफ टर्नओवर हो कुछ साइट्स पे, यानी हाई स्टाफ टर्नओवर मतलब बंदे आते हैं और छोड़ के जाते हैं, उसका अगर रेट बहुत ज़्यादा रहे तो वो बहुत ज़्यादा इफेक्ट होता है। तो फार्मा कंपनीज कभी नहीं चाहती कि नॉर्मली उनका टर्नओवर रेट ज़्यादा रहे, यानी कि आप आए और काम किया 6 महीने और छोड़ दिया, ऐसा नहीं चलता है वो। So that's what they nowadays, that's the reason why these companies are looking out for contract laboring work. तो कॉन्ट्रैक्ट लेबरिंग में क्या रहता है कि वो कॉन्ट्रैक्टर को ही पकड़ते हैं लोग, आई मीन दे आर नॉट रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर द एम्प्लॉय पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू। ऐसा इसके लिए यूज ऑफ सीआरओ फॉर मॉनिटरिंग, अगर आपने कॉन्ट्रैक्ट रिसर्च ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को यूज किया है मॉनिटरिंग के लिए, सो द कॉन्ट्रैक्ट में से विजिट एवरी 6 to 8 वीक्स, अगर ऐसा सब रहेगा तो यानी आपका कॉन्ट्रैक्टर के साथ यानी सीआरओ के साथ का इंटरफेस टाइम बाउंड रहेगा। आप रोज रोज थोड़ी ना देखोगे, तो फिर रोज रोज करोगे तो फिर देन आपने उसको सीआरओ को काय को दिया वर्क, ऐसा भी रहेगा। So in these sort of cases there can be risk. Okay. Another is delays in getting IP packaged, यानी अगर आपका जो इन्वेस्टिगेशन प्रोडक्ट का पैकेजिंग है वो टाइम पे नहीं भेजा गया तो then that can also lead to problems in that part. Fine guys? Okay, so I took a minute time just to explain this so that it becomes more clear. तो ये भी clear है बेटा आपको?
Yes sir.
Yes.
ये एक आइकॉन का केस डिटेल है, देख लो आप।
Hello and welcome to this script webinar in association with ICON. My name is Jo Shorthouse. I'm the features editor on Script and have covered all aspects of the pharmaceutical industry for the last 8 years. My guest for this webinar is Clara Hearing, the Senior Vice President of Clinical Risk and Data Management for ICON. Clara has over 20 years' experience in clinical research, which spans both the CRO and pharma industries. Today, we're going to discuss the looming and significant changes to the ICH GCP guidelines. These guidelines not only harmonise the conduct of clinical trials in light of the various regulatory reforms by ICH member states, but they also establish novel, forward-thinking principles. These changes have broad implications for those working within the clinical research industry, and it is important that they're ready to adapt to the changes and embrace a shift in processes and behaviours. Sponsors really need to be aware of what is required of them in this new risk management framework, and Clara is here today to answer all my questions about the biggest impacts and how, in practice, the industry can ready itself. So, Clara, if you were to be asked what is the single biggest change that these new guidelines are going to bring, what would that be?
Well, actually, Jo, there's 3 main topics of change.
Okay.
The first one is around technology.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is around a risk-based approach to quality and monitoring. And the third one is around oversight.
Okay, so if we could just go firstly into technology, what are the really big changes that's going to come into that arena?
So I think we have a lot of opportunity with the new technologies that aggregate data to look at trends earlier. And therefore, we need to make sure that the people who look at those type of aggregated data are trained properly in how to use that data and make decisions on the right things. So we do not want to have early decisions that might influence the outcome of the study in a negative way, but we want to safeguard human subject protection and data reliability through these new tools. Another part around technology is it changes. It changes all the time.
Yes.
There are new inventions, new ways in which we can use data to progress. And what regulators want us to do is to make sure that in 20 years' time, when we look at whatever is the data technology at that moment, we can still recreate the environment that was active today, so we can validate, they can validate, and we can validate the data and the data structures that were built today, and validate the assumptions and decisions that were made based on the data that is made available today. So how do we validate the technology? How do we maintain it as we change from version to version or innovate around technology?
Okay.
And the last thing is we want to make sure that if we take a document and put it into a technology system, that doesn't lose any of the essential features of that document. So have some way in which we certify documents and copies of documents.
Okay. So what about the risk-based quality and monitoring side of things? I mean, this must be, I would think that would be a really, really huge
That is a huge change indeed. And it's actually due to the way that we've evolved in our hospitals and how we treat patients, as well as how we think about protocols. So if you think about how hospitals have evolved, it used to be that we had a single investigator and study nurse who would do all the trial activities.
Yes.
That's no longer the case. We have a lot of people and also a lot of devices and technologies that are changing in hospitals. So we need to adapt our monitoring practice to this variability and still get reliable data.
Okay.
And what do we do there? So we have to think about what do we really need to verify when we are on site? How do we verify that the device that is being used is delivering the data with the right kind of accuracy as it's set out in the protocol? And how can we use the new technologies to see in a central way, in an aggregated way, if there are trends that are indicative of issues in different hospitals, in different sites around data. So really take a much more proactive approach in thinking ahead of time about this type of variability and focus our activities on what is critical data and processes for the trial at hand in human subject protection and study data reliability.
So these all seem to be quite practical things that we need to be thinking about, the practical use of technology, the centralization of data and using that data and verifying it. So what about, you mentioned oversight as well. That seems to be a very important part for the sponsor to be thinking about, I'm assuming, because the oversight of the CRO and the study sites.
Yes, indeed. The regulators have also included now in ICH a much more descriptive sentence around what sponsors need to do in order to verify that the CROs are delivering quality and that they are being overseen by the sponsors. So there is a real recognition that sponsors need to oversee the CROs and how they work, but also sites, investigators and institutions also deploy certain services, delegate tasks, and they also need to maintain oversight over those tasks. And that's now mandated by ICH GCP. It was always in the spirit, but it's now clearly documented there.
So there's a very practical description of, or a principle of this is what we really need you to be doing.
Exactly. ICH is really about principles.
Yes.
It's about saying what the outcome needs to be, and how you get there is what we all are striving to get as efficiently as possible.
So if we could just carry on this theme of how things are going to change in very much in practical terms, I'm interested in the way that the changes to these guidelines are going to impact the way that clinical trials are actually conducted in physical terms, really. So what's going to be the impact on sponsors specifically?
So I think there are things that will change in how sponsors and CROs interact with each other.
Okay.
There is a lot more focus on starting the monitoring activities with a risk assessment. And the sponsor needs to bring to that risk assessment their prior knowledge around what has happened in the prior trials or even preclinical data around that particular investigational product that they're developing, so that we can jointly think about what could go wrong, where the risks are in that particular trial. And so the sponsors and the CROs need to work much more together in focusing on what matters and building a monitoring plan that addresses that.
So that the interaction between them has got to be much closer. So, and also from a much earlier starting point, I would think.
Indeed. And then the sponsors need to be enabled to manage the risks or be clear about which risk management pieces they want to delegate to the sponsor, which decisions they want to retain, and which decisions they're happy to have the CROs take in terms of level of risk at patient level, at operations level, and all the different aspects of the trial conduct. So really, sponsors need to think ahead of time, what is it that they want to delegate and want to keep in terms of risk management.
Okay. And what about the impact on sites and investigators? Are they also going to have to be involved in much more in the planning stages, or is that going to be impacted at all? Or?
Right. So what happens in practice is that the new monitoring strategy deployed by CROs or sponsors has a different impact on sites. Before we would go, the CRA would go to the site on a very regular schedule, let's say every 6 to 8 weeks, and they would manage the quality in that way.
Yes.
Now, with a mix of on-site and central monitoring, not only will the CRAs do more by telephone, they will go to sites maybe less frequently, but how they conduct their investigations and monitoring activities might be slightly different to what sites have been used to. They will be going much more into detail around how things are done and verify the procedures and ask questions around which devices, calibrations in much more detail perhaps than before, and more regularly than before, because we're really trying to get at that consistent way at which we gather data from all sites.
Okay. And I guess we've also got to think about kind of the end user almost in this situation, the patient. Is it going to affect them in any way? Are they looking at more paperwork perhaps, or different ways of recording data? Is that going to have an impact on their kind of daily lives, as it were, in a clinical trial?
So as such, the ICH-GCP guidelines really help us to think more and more about what matters to patients. So what is the critical data for human subject protection, their integrity, do they give the right consents, and focus on the data and processes at site to support patient safety and make sure that we get the best type of data for assessing efficacy. Perhaps previously the spirit was more, what do investigators and doctors think would work for patients? Today we're much more focused in all our activities on what matters to the end user, the patient.
Yes.
And there is a lot of innovation around that, and we are trying and pulling the patient into decision making earlier, more in how protocols are written and what kind of data we gather. So patients will over time be involved more and more and more in the framework of decision making around clinical trials.
And as you say, it's a lot of this kind of activity is going on in the industry. Patient centricity is a huge buzz phrase from the last couple of years. So it's nice to see that it's also reflected in guidelines as well when it comes to actually interacting with the patient in the way that they experience the clinical study as well.
Right. So the guidance is really focusing on critical data for human subject protection and study data reliability, which in the end is going to focus more and more on what matters to patients.
So when these guidelines do eventually come into force, what practical steps should be taken by sponsors and by CROs?
So I think sponsors perhaps need to consider how they are maintaining systematic oversight of tasks they conduct themselves and delegate to CROs and sponsors in this new environment where we are focusing more on critical data and processes. What is it that they need to take decisions on in terms of human subject protection, in terms of investigational product, vendor reliability, topics that matter in the conduct of the clinical trial and development of the asset to a particular aim. There are roles that are existing in the sponsor which might have been focused on delivering tasks, which now evolve into more critical thinking, into more decision making. And so what is it that they need to support there in order to help evolve and manage those changes? In terms of how CROs help sponsors in that space, is what can we as CROs do to support sponsors in having the right kind of data, the right kind of transparency of how we operate, and maintain effective oversight without necessarily having to duplicate everything.
Yes.
So what is it that you can rely on? What is it that gives that level of comfort that you have control without micromanagement or redoing things, but really focusing on what matters? So technologies help, skills help, processes help. And so what is it that we all need to do in terms of our own skills to support this new environment?
It sounds like perhaps there might be a different aspect of the partnership between CROs and sponsors moving forward as well, much more, perhaps much more guidance from the CROs, and just a shift perhaps in the way that those two elements come together to create a clinical study.
It can, yes. So I think the sponsors are all in different places.
Yes.
So there are sponsors who are very evolved in their own space around adopting the new ICH guidance. There are others that are perhaps very small or have very few resources to enable that, and who are more reliant on CROs to support them in this change. So there is a variation, but every sponsor needs to think, what is it that they feel is critical for them in terms of oversight, and how will they get what they need there, and CROs are there to help.
So what steps should be taken to address readiness in this new paradigm that we're seeing about to begin?
Yeah, so I think it's if you look at how the ICH GCP was introduced in the draft document, they're focusing on technologies and risk management sciences to enable us to evolve to this new paradigm. So what do you as a company have in terms of technology, people, and processes that enable you to do that? What is it that you are learning about those risk sciences? There is a huge wealth of information coming from other industries which have focused on risk management sciences perhaps before we did as an industry. So invest in keeping up to date on what is available from aviation, nuclear industry, health and safety are even sometimes ahead of us in a lot of aspects. So what is it that we need to learn in terms of approaches to guiding people, guiding technology, and in the end, of course, having the processes that drive us here.
So it sounds like this might be quite a good time for introspection, for companies to almost reassess themselves and look at their processes, as you say, learn from other industries like aviation, etc., and really be quite critical about themselves, I'm assuming, and look at it, what can we do better, and where are our strengths?
Yes, I think that's a good perspective. Having said that, I think we have done an amazing job already in supporting development of new investigational products that help patients worldwide. I think there is an opportunity to evolve that to an even better space. And so I think this is about being excited about what we can learn rather than to be critical about what we did in the past. I think, and I really believe that's the excitement buzz, even though I know most people don't like change. This is the exciting bit about it.
If we take out the word change and replace it with innovation, perhaps
it helps.
Yes,
it helps.
That's more of a buzz.
Indeed. Yeah.
So guys, the intention of showing this video or was sharing this video was the talk with Senior Vice President of ICON, and it was pertaining to beta ICH R2. So there are amendments to it, there are changes to it as the technology increases and enhances. यानी जैसे जैसे टेक्नोलॉजी इंक्रीज हो रहा है, एनहांस हो रहा है, उसमें चेंजेस आ रहा है. फॉर एग्जांपल टेक्नोलॉजी में पहले क्या होता था कि डॉक्टर और पेशेंट का डायरेक्टली इंटरफेस होता था, ओके, और क्लिनिकल, अभी जैसे क्लिनिकल रिसर्च एसोसिएट है, उसको ट्रैवल करके साइट्स पे जाना पड़ता था. अभी अब कोरोना के पीरियड में अभी तो वो ट्रैवल कर ही नहीं सकता है, अब वो साइट्स पे जा नहीं सकता है, तो क्या डेटा आना बंद हो जाएगा, आप ट्रायल्स नहीं करोगे? ऐसा तो नहीं है। क्यों? क्योंकि आपके पास दूसरे ऑप्शंस हैं। दूसरे ऑप्शंस कौन कौन सा है? तो देर आर टेक्निक्स लाइक IVRS, IWRS, ओके, so interactive voice recognition systems, interactive web recognition systems, रोबोटिक पार्ट्स, टेलीमेडिसिन फिनोमिनन, तो ये सारी चीज़ें भी इम्प्लीमेंट हुए हैं। तो अगर ये इम्प्लीमेंट हुए हैं, टेक्नोलॉजी इम्प्लीमेंट हुआ है, तो टेक्नोलॉजी इम्प्लीमेंटेशन के लिए कोई भी रेगुलेटरी बॉडी मना नहीं करता है, बट वो ये चाहता है कि आप जब वो इंस्पेक्शन करे वो सिनेरियो क्रिएट कर सको और उसको एक्सप्लेन कर सको, जस्टिफाई कर सको, वैलिडेट कर सको कि सारे का सारा रूल्स एंड रेगुलेशंस फॉलो हुआ था या नहीं हुआ था। So that sort of a thing is being there. Just like अभी for example अभी lectures हो रहा है, okay बेटा, तो lectures हो रहा है तो आपके जो lectures हैं वो online हो रहे हैं, तो online lectures का credibility में थोड़ा सा question mark रहता है कि भाई कौन attend कर रहा है, कौन attend नहीं कर रहा है। तो बेटा systems के पास उसका एक track रहता है, जैसे आपका attendance record रहता है वैसे आपका system का record रहता है, जो रिकॉर्डिंग के साथ ये रखता है कि किसने अटेंड किया, किसने अटेंड नहीं किया, ये सारा करता है। एट द सेम टाइम ये आपका इंटरफेस भी बताता है कि वेदर द अटेंटिवनेस इज देयर और नॉट। तो अब ये है, तो यूनिवर्सिटीज, कॉलेजेस, ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस जो ये कंडक्ट कर रहे हैं, वो लोगों को ये मालूम है कि भाई ये सिस्टम्स है। तो अगर नैक का परमिशन अब आपको चाहिए, नैक का एक्रेडिटेशन चाहिए, तो नैक एक्रेडिटेशन में आप ये बताओगे कि आपने ऑनलाइन कैसे कंडक्ट किया था, क्या ट्रेनिंग किया था, कैसे फन किया था, उसके बेसिस पे आपको एक्रेडिटेशन मिल जाएगा। तो नैक एक्रेडिटेशन इसके लिए नहीं रुक जाएगा कि भाई इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर नहीं था। अब इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर का बजाय में आपका वेदर यू आर बीन एबल टू प्रोवाइड द राइट प्लेटफॉर्म फॉर द स्टूडेंट्स टू स्टडी, इंटरैक्ट एंड ग्रो and prospectively conduct examination, ऐसा क्वेश्चन आता है बेटा। Okay, so this is the way how the interaction changes, and that's what is all about when you would be doing all these entities in sync. Okay beta, is it clear guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay beta, so this is what was supposed to be known to for you to for a GCP point of view, minimum criteria of 4 hours completion, okay, which beta you both have completed. What I know is I know Ashita Nambiar and Rinku Bhattacharya has completed this part. So guys, you have certain time period which I told you already, in which you can prepare and then you can approach and give the examination. While approaching and giving the examination, beta, you will have to share across your email ID. When you share the email ID, we will be having official documentation for you send across on that, because उसी email ID पे आपको official request भी आएगा documentation के लिए, और उसी पे आपको certificate का dispensing भी होगा. So that's the thing which you both can do beta. Okay, fine. Any questions till now beta?
No, sir.
Okay, so you have 1.5 week minimum. So today is so before 15th of April, beta, you can plan up and let us know. And meanwhile, you can communicate and let me know about in the next lectures. Lectures तो मेरा continue रहेगा आपके लिए. तो उस वक्त आप बता सकते हो कि whenever you are ready for that particular point of your exam or anything like that. Okay, guys. And for others who have beta joined today but were not there in the first lecture, unfortunately beta, we will not be able to commit out the time period of the 4-hour scheduling and 6-hour scheduling. So I'll take the lecture point of view and continue and explain the things, but maybe next time only you will be able to beta. Okay, fine. Okay, I saw 3 more persons were there today. I saw Asma was there, Kartika was there, Kritika, no? Kritika was there and Sneha was there. Okay, but unfortunately, GCP का 4-hour का continuous session is an eligibility point of view. इसीलिए मैं उस दिन भी रुका था, unfortunately. So only Ashita and Rinku were there. So next time better luck, beta. Okay. Alright guys, thank you so much beta for coming and attending the lecture on time. As promised, I took the lecture on Saturday itself and I have completed your 4-hour schedule requirement, which is a minimum criteria for completion of a minimum train perspective of GCP point of view. You guys can study for the time duration as described, and then you can attempt for the examination. Best of luck for that. And meanwhile, we'll continue the next lecture, continuing further on the topic. Okay, beta?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Goodbye and good night to all.
Okay, sir.
Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Thank you,
Good
sir.
night.